Everyone, here we are back with chapter 3. We're going to talk about the history of advertising. See if I can get a little better shot there. Okay, that's better. So in B 151, we talk about the history of marketing, and today we're going to look at that through the advertising lens. Okay, so first, as we always do, the framework of the chapter, so you can see we're there in part 3. We talk about advertising, integrated brand promotion in business and society. Here we're going to talk about the history of advertising. We talk about the rise of advertising, the significant errors in advertising, and forces that are shaping advertising for today and tomorrow. Okay, so one thing that really played a big role in it is this whole idea of the rise of capitalism. And we live in a capitalist society that we try to encourage competition, and that increases demand. So because of that, we would have need, hang on a second, sorry about that. We would have need for more goods. So the Industrial Revolution was really very significant in increasing in supply of goods, increase of mass-produced goods, and then more demand. So the other thing too, in terms of owning businesses, that is the idea of limited liability, that it restricted investors' risk in a business, so that they would be more likely to invest, not sure if the business would fail or not. So that was easier for businesses to get money, through the stock markets. Okay, and then also the rise of modern branding. Of course, we are talking about integrated brand promotion throughout the course of the semester. And branding is developing brand names to be focused and identified by the consumer. So this idea that, when you think of McDonald's, you think of the brand. When you think of Under Armour, you think of the brand. And then also the rise of mass media. Mass media are supported by advertising. We talk about mass media, radio, television, newspapers, now online platforms, because mass media sells advertising that people buy, and that's what supports all these things that we can watch and listen to and read. All right, so let's talk about some different eras of advertising. Pre-industrial, which is pre-1800s. Think of it in 1800, we were a young country. We've just gotten our constitution for the first time. We still have there are certainly urban centers, but we have a very rural economy, a lot of agriculture. Most advertisements were printed advertisements that were in these news books that would be sent out, not necessarily on a super regular basis, but on a daily basis. But they did exist. They were, because transportation was poor, so people didn't. It was hard to get publications places quickly. But essentially, advertisements were simple announcements. They were done by very skilled laborers. It was for basic needs that people had: soap, clothing, fabric, that kind of thing. And then industrialization, the 19th century, the first 3 quarters of the 19th century, all of a sudden we had dailies. That's the idea of a newspaper is like a daily newspaper, and also the urban centers were growing because of the industrial change. Because of industrialization, people were moving off farms and working in factories, and also the sphere of influence that people had was just not only limited. It was no longer just limited to your family, but also other coworkers and friends and that kind of thing, and people from different cultures as well. And there were no laws to regulate or restrict advertisement. So things are quickly changing. And then we talk about P.T. Barnum. You may remember P.T. Barnum as the Barnum and Bailey Circus, but is known as one of the great marketers in history. And this idea that advertising was based on the consumer, that we were creating this consumer culture. And it was the way of life that was centered on buying things, and things haven't changed too much from then. So advertising at this time becomes a full-fledged industry. It's not just something that you see infrequently, but became a little bit more sophisticated, and people started becoming interested in brands. Coca-Cola, for example, started in this era. Ford started in this era. The other thing too is all of a sudden we are seeing a little bit more legislation coming in. We have the Pure Food and Drug Act that required people to list ingredients on their products, And also social and cultural changes opened up opportunities. What I was referring to before, the change for people from living in rural areas to living in urban areas and urban centers. They might have a little bit more free time. People have more free time. They might have a little bit more excess income. Um, and again, people are changing the way they live and with whom they live and all that kind of thing. So, and also more people are living in more concentrated areas. So again, advertising has a bigger audience. Okay, 1920s, the Roaring Twenties. Things are a lot of cultural changes as well. Women get the vote during this time. World War I is over, so our eyes are kind of wide to a lot of things that we hadn't thought about before. Airplanes, the Ferris wheel, uh, uh, silent movies, photography is growing, all these kinds of things. Um, the idea of refrigeration is coming in, that kind of thing. So, and also advertising all of a sudden finds a certain level of respectability. So, although consumers were a little bit leery about uh, modernism and technology, they still were interested in it. Also, this idea of the chain of needs, this idea that needs lead to products that lead to new needs, which can only be satisfied by more new products. Kind of like when you think about in this age when we went from the desktop to the laptop to the tablet, that now people have watches that keep things, and and handheld phones, that kind of thing. Women are growing in significance because of, as I said, all of a sudden women have the right to vote, but they're seen as significant in terms of making purchasing decisions. And science and technology really is making a big difference as well with some of the things I referred to earlier. All right, and then splat. After that, it's the Great Depression. Terrible time in our history. Um, really changed the way people thought about money and also how people felt about the economy in general, that the stock market crash and the way people are being treated in factories and all that kind of thing. So we were in it was a very difficult and trying time for our country, and so advertisers really just focused on things, no frills advertising, nothing too fancy. And all of a sudden, radio emerges as a new medium, which is very important. And we have more legislation. The Wheeler-Lee Amendment said that deceptive ads were against the law, which seems so logical to us now, but wasn't at that time. Okay, now we move into World War II in the 1950s, a time of great triumph and great defeat for our country in terms of casualties in the war and what people, what people were thinking about. But then we came back and we rebuilt, and it was a great boom time. The 1950s, in many ways, were a great boom time. But people were concerned about being manipulated by advertising still, particularly subliminal advertising. There's a lot of people that don't necessarily agree with subliminal advertising. The idea is that there are images etched in or certain words used, whatever, that will subliminate, make our subconscious believe that we should buy something. So the whole idea of psychology is becoming a bigger part of advertising. Okay, so this is just not showing well. I apologize, but you can see it if you print out the slides. You'll see it's also in the book. This is an advertisement for war bonds. I apologize for that. This one is also not great to see, but you'll see that people were going after women. Women joined the workforce during the war. There were so many men who were overseas fighting that women were obliged to join the workforce. We celebrated for that. 1950s also, this idea of scientific discoveries. This is one of the earliest computers. So as I talked about it, that it's at electric speed. You can see a big computer there. The woman in the bottom is at a computer as well. All right. Other also 1950s ad example. The idea of it says the attack of the 50-foot woman. Horror films and King Kong and all that kind of thing, and showing women in maybe not the greatest light, but there they are. So the objectification of women. And then a hay fever ad, which kind of goes back to the simple ads of years gone by. for something very basic. One thing that when you think about this is that really, looking at old ads, you can really trace the social and cultural history of our culture, social and cultural history of our society, of the United States, and also technology as well. You think about how ads have changed. So we move on. Uh, Peace, love, and the creative revolution in the 1960s, civil rights movement, women's rights movement, uh, and things became it was a completely radical shift. So women and minorities, although they're fighting for their rights, are portrayed, generally speaking, in submissive roles, and that's not necessarily a good thing, but it was a way when who knows where that was coming from. But advertising also became what we refer to as a symbol of consumption itself, and that sort of the evils of consumption. We became sensitive to that. Okay, now here's another ad. You can't quite see it, and I apologize, but again, it's a woman who's dressed up in a spacesuit, and should refer to your slides for that one or the book as well. Okay, here's another one, American Airlines ad. There's a cute little stewardess on there. This idea that she's saying, oh, I feel like I'm throwing a party every day. Typical depiction. Airline travel, not so much of a party anymore. And then here's another one. You can see it fading. It's also a little bit faded. But do you remember in Marketing 1, we talked about this whole idea of motivation, and specifically we spoke about Maslow's need hierarchy that starts out with the need for the bottom is our physiological needs, air, water, food, and then safety, social, self-esteem, and then self-actualization. And this is an ad to attractive young people drinking a Pepsi. And so the idea is it responds to our need for socialization, that if you drink Pepsi, you too will, be a cute young couple drinking Pepsi, because that's what that brand says. And then here's the iconic picture of the 1960s. It's again better viewing with your in your book, your slides, but the Volkswagen, emblematic of 1960s culture. And then here are our old gold cigarettes, which, again, kind of the glamorization of smoking and objectification of women. And then this, I wish you could see this better. I don't know why you can't. It's a father and a son. It's an ad for Crest toothpaste. They are selling Crest toothpaste, but really what they're selling is this idea of family and bonding. And you see a father and a son, and this moment of bonding moment where the father is teaching the son how to tie a tie. Okay, so let's move on here. Okay, back to being able to see. 1970s, 73 to 1980. Again, there's this whole idea of self-indulgence and rise in just, this huge party lifestyle that existed in the 70s. That people were fat and drunk and that kind of thing. The other, a lot of people were very self-indulgent, and that was encouraged. You would see that encouraged in advertising. Also, children's television came into the fore in the late 60s, early 70s, and that became something that was very significant in the growth of advertising. The Federal Trade Commission and National Advertising Review Board demanded higher standards of honesty and disclosure from advertising. So again, there's this distrust of advertising, and it's been going on for a while. So oftentimes when we have things that we distrust, we solve that problem by legislating them. And communications technology increases. That the 1980, the first cell phones came out in the early 80s. So let's see, this idea of self-indulgence, that's a Burger King ad. It says, have it your way. Again, this idea of self-indulgence. And then speaking to this idea of authenticity, Coke, the real thing. Again, spoke to those times that people were looking for. Okay, now we're moving on. From 1980 to 1992, designer era, consumption was promoted. Let's see if we can get a little bit better shot there. Sorry about that. Uh, Greed is Good time. Gordon Gekko, if any of you saw that movie. So it's also editing technology is changing, and so you can really rapid cut editing style. MTV comes into play. Video killed the radio star. All that kind of thing. That's a very flashy, fast-paced, high-rolling time. And then the e-revolution begins, 1993 to 2000. So internet advertising, people are starting to use email, and the internet is growing, and e-brand promotions and that kind of thing. Advertisers start to demand better results in terms with interactive media, buying immediately, that kind of thing. And advertising moved from its roots in New York out west to be combined with entertainment. Okay, then what is occurring now? What's impacting us now? The first thing that really occurred that started off this whole latest change is the idea of the dot-com bubble burst. That there were so many dot-coms, then a lot of them blew up in the early 2000s, and also having easiest access to information and integration of all sorts of different media, kind of a blurred line between television and online and all that kind of thing. Another ad, Tanqueray. You can see that. Symbolizing this kind of slick, cool time. The guy in the sunglasses and the leather jacket drinking gin. Okay, so this whole idea of branded entertainment and connecting all the platforms together. Then we had the Great Recession, which is 2000 to the present time. So consumer-generated content that things are coming from consumers that you could have consumers driving ads and also information, being able to share information online and all that kind of thing. But when the Great Recession came in 2008, there were lots of budget cuts, and people had to focus on non-traditional forms of advertising and brand promotion, guerrilla marketing, and looking for lower cost ways to get their price out there, and also increase competition online with e-businesses. So it was and still is a struggle for retailing, which would change advertising and how to get people in there. The traditional, Sunday supplement ads weren't quite as effective as jumping on Amazon. Social networking sites also changed things. It helped to enhance e-commerce, the brand communities, and that kind of thing. Okay, then branded entertainment, also referred to as Madison and Vine, advertising and brand promotion and product placement. So, what do they drink on American Idol? They drank Coca-Cola. You'll see, the Aston Martin and James Bond movies. Oftentimes when you're watching a movie, you'll see product placement for coffee or for Apple computers or certain types of bottled water, that kind of thing. That's brand promotion. It's a way to cut through the noise and to get people to think about the brands in other situations, not just when they're looking at advertising, and it really can be very effective. Okay, this is a ad for this type of branded entertainment. That also another type of branded entertainment. This idea that when you go to a concert or an event, a sporting event, you'll see lots of ads for companies in the background. Do you see it, or does it get lost in the shuffle? I don't know. I guess it's probably different for everyone. And integrated brand promotion. We've got the ad for Harley Davidson. So miles or kilometers, passion unites us all. This idea of looking at multiple demographics in one photo. Then also the Pepsi, showing this idea of trying to drink up, rock out. If you drink Pepsi, it's this idea of this excitement and the excitement of a rock concert or a big concert. Okay, and finally, just to look at it's how the importance of looking at history for understanding integrated brand promotion. So it remains that it's a paid attempt to persuade people. Traditional advertising and media are still used, but technology has changed that, and it's enhanced how people and changed how people shop and how they get their information, along with social media, and also this idea of being able to understand a brand's history. The past often informs us of the future, so that's very, very valuable for us. Okay, so that's it. We're wrapping up chapter 3. Yeah, chapter 3. We'll see you back here for chapter 4.